Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next up, we have agenda adjustments. I'm going to propose 3. We should add policy AD to the revision list. And the health curriculum proposal is going to be dropped this week and moved to June 6th. And we need, I don't know that we formally need to add it, but we need to add a resignation to the, where is it, 8B. So we have nominations and resignations. So I would motion to make those 3 agenda adjustments. Is there a second? So, thank you, Michelle. So again, just adding AD under the policies, it would be a revision, dropping the item on health curriculum proposal because it will come up next week, and adding resignations to the action items. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Okay, next up, we have consideration of minutes. First up is April 25th. I had one edit. It's on the top of the first line of the last page, stipends. It says stipends for the arts, but I don't think that was, the for the arts part, I don't think was an accurate representation of the discussion, so I'd like to just drop the phrase for the arts. There were quite a few factors involved. Were there any other comments on the minutes? Okay, I would motion to adopt the minutes as amended. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All those in favor? Okay, next up, we have the minutes for May 5th. Any comments on this one? Okay, motion to adopt the minutes as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Okay. Next up, we okay?
I just wanted to note that we had a board meeting May 2nd, and we're going to have those minutes ready at the next meeting.
Okay. Next up is warrants. So I would motion to adopt or approve warrants 23, 24, 24 payroll, and main purse. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Warrants haven't made it to this end.
Oh, they're right here. I think, other than the payrolls, you have probably already seen them, but give you a minute to look at those if you want.
No, I'm also.
Okay. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of approving the warrants? Okay, thank you. Next up is acknowledgements. You want to start, Aaron? You can pass.
I know there's stuff, but I can't remember, so I
It's been a long time since the last board meeting.
I'd like to acknowledge the community who came out for the vote on the budget. I thought the questions were great and the crowd was really invested, so I appreciate them coming out. The community reading event at ASA, I know, I'll just say it was great and I'll let you elaborate. No, that's it. It's really great. The kids were great. And the Arts Honor Society at the middle school. Sorry, everybody seems upset, but that was really fun, and it was really nice to take my family and go and do lots of arts projects, so thank you.
Well, I'm going to talk loud because apparently my mic's not working. Everything you said was what I was going to say, so thank you. I second that.
You want to go, Aaron?
Yes, please. The teachers did a wonderful job at Arts and Literacy Night at ASA. We had Scott Nash there. It was a really wonderful event.
So I would agree with all those. I'll just say I had fun at the community reading event. And I believe technically it's been since the last board meeting that the middle school and high school concerts happened. They were great. And what was the other thing? Anyway, I'll close with that.
We have a tremendous amount of stuff going on across the district, from the elementary school through to the high school. I wanted to acknowledge the high school students. I get to spend some time at a leadership and luncheon this past month, and there are no reports this meeting from the administration. We'll have those next meeting. But I wanted to note that. And the other piece that has been a major project for the faculty with regard to negotiations, those are, excuse me, I don't want to say ceasing, they're coming to an end. I'm looking at Ms. Goodall on the back table, but both will, the support staff and the faculty, we hope to have a ratified contract, both from the ESP unit for next meeting, and hopefully one from the Teachers Association for the June 20th meeting. So those are exciting things to know. Thank you.
Everything on my list is already done, so thank you.
I'd like to acknowledge the junior class for throwing a fantastic prom. It was very fun. And also all the students who were inducted in the French National Honor Society, the Spanish National Honor Society, and the National Art Honor Society.
I'd also like to acknowledge the junior class, but also the parents that helped out with the prom to throw an awesome prom. And also our track and tennis teams have had great past weekends, I guess. Yeah, track won PVCs and tennis is heading into playoffs, so pretty great.
Thanks. Any forgotten acknowledgements? Next up is public comment. There's a list back there. You don't have to be on the list. Is there anybody who would like to speak during public comment? No? Okay, that's fine. We have one at the end of the meeting too, since we have a lot of new people. We have a public comment at the beginning of every meeting and at the end of every meeting, and that's a chance for anybody from the public to get up and tell us what they're thinking about things. And that's a chance to argue for things, against things, or make any other points you'd like the board to consider. I'll also note, since we have students, we do have 2 student representatives here on the board, so they're in high school, but you can, of course, talk to them with concerns to represent for the students as well. All right, so with no public comment, we come to presentations, and the first presentation is the OMS students, Connie Carter, and Operation Breaking Stereotypes. And I've been getting to work with this group since January, and I've had a lot of fun, but I'm sure they're going to tell you all about it.
They're going to do everything, except that I just want to thank all of you for having us come and speak with you. And I also want to acknowledge the teachers who have been incredibly helpful as we've tried to bring 3 schools together, which is no small chore. Deb Bishop, of course, from Orono Middle School, Tracy Newt from Indian Island School, Tracy O'Connell, we've got lots of Tracys, from Leonard Middle School, and also Adele Drake from Leonard Middle School. And I'm happy to see Jen Sear here, who's the principal of Leonard Middle School today as well. So, and some of their teammates are here from the other schools to support them as the Orono schools, Orono students give you their presentation. So it's been a great ride. We're excited. Next Monday, we are going to the Samantha Smith Challenge celebration in Waterville, which will be over 500 middle school students from around the state presenting projects that they have worked on in honor and memory of Samantha Smith, so taking on an issue in their community that they think is important to address, and connecting with community stakeholders, and then making an action plan and doing something. So these students have chosen climate change, and they're going to tell you all about that. And I want to do one more big acknowledgement to Brian McGill, who has given a talk about climate change about 25 times to various groups of students. So thank you, Brian.
Thank you all for letting us come and talk to you about climate change tonight. We are all members of the OMS Operation Breaking Stereotypes group. As members of OBS, we work together to connect different cultures, tribes, and backgrounds, leaving stereotypes behind. We, as a group, try to see past differences and understand what makes each person unique.
In order to educate ourselves and other students in the area about climate change and its effects on us and our planet, we decided to work together on a project with our partners at Indian Island School and Leonard Middle School. This project offers an opportunity for our 3 schools to interact with and learn about each other while breaking community stereotypes and addressing a global issue that impacts all of us. We are working together toward a common goal, and we are hoping to make a difference, no matter how small it may be.
Okay, what we've done so far. We have visited the Climate Change Center at the University of Maine, where we saw ice cores from Antarctica, watched a laser cut through an ice core, and saw 9,000-year-old mud cores. We participated in a presentation where we heard about the greenhouse effect and learned about the future impact of global warming. We listened to a follow-up presentation at OMS where we heard about the realities of climate change and learned about what we can do to slow the effects of global warming. We planned public service announcements for our communities, and we gathered pledges from all of the OMS students to do something positive about climate change.
We've learned some shocking facts. In the past 15 years, we have experienced 14 of the 15 hottest years ever recorded. The world is projected to be about 8 degrees warmer by 2080, and though that may not seem like a lot, it truly is. This will cause fish to swim to the poles where it's cooler, making fishermen lose their jobs. Also, many crops will not be able to be grown in Maine anymore. Potentially, whole coastal cities will be flooded.
So there are many ways how climate change can affect the world. So the U.S. has the second great output of greenhouse gases in the world, which is a really big problem. As more carbon is released into the atmosphere, the planet warms more and more. This will cause extreme heat along the equator, and many species will have to migrate away to northern and southern regions. There will be floods in the desert and droughts where there was once plenty of water. Humans will have to change their diet and lifestyle due to these effects.
So we had all the OMS students write pledges about what they're going to do to help stop and slow down climate change. And we had 19 students say that they will take shorter showers, 16 say that they will reduce, reuse, recycle, and 15 who said they would unplug chargers or use less electricity, 11 that said they will bike more and drive less. So we would like you to help us make a difference in reducing the effects of global warming in our community.
None of us can do this work alone. Everybody needs to chip in to accomplish our plan. If not enough people support this cause, nothing will be done to prevent climate change, and the temperature will continue rising at an alarming rate. However, if all of us help the Earth, it will be a step in the right direction. How can you help?
Change will not come if we wait for some other person, or if we wait for some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the change we seek. Barack Obama.
Thank you all again. We would just like to recognize our partners from LMS and Indian Island School. If you guys could just stand up. So these are all of the people we've been working with about climate change. And if you have any questions, we can answer them.
One more thing. We were just hoping to work together with the school board to address this issue, and it would be great to know what we could do to help.
Do you have any thoughts or recommendations about what you would like to see the school board do?
One of the possible things, it's a bigger step, but replacing the lights in the school with LED lights. They use much less electricity and are much more efficient.
Another thing we could do is we could plant a garden for the cafeteria. It would be a small step, but it would be a good step in the right direction.
Also, one thing connecting to the garden is we could have like compost bins in our lunchrooms and use the compost for a garden.
Thinking we could also, in Orno, at stores, instead of using paper or plastic bags, we could only use cloth bags.
Anybody else? Okay. So I would like to thank you for your presentation. That was very professional. And, you know, they say our students are our future, and that's very clear. We're in good hands, and that you guys have done a lot of work, and that that's a really great thing. So the way the board tends to work is we usually research things, and then we put on the agenda, I don't know if you guys saw that, there's some back on the tables of what we're going to discuss at a meeting, and then we take votes to actually do specific things. So as far as a process working with the board, it would probably involve some research, and then making a specific proposal that we could announce in advance on an agenda. Does that sound like a process that you guys would be able to work with us on, or anybody else on the board have any thoughts or comments?
Great job.
So I guess I heard a couple things, the LED lights, the garden, and the composting. Are those things that perhaps you could do a little research on and then come back with a specific proposal for the board? And we would need to know in advance and put it on an agenda, and then we could discuss it. Is that, Connie, does that sound like a?
Brian, wasn't there some work done on possible composting or recycling or something in the lunchroom, and then we were updated on it, and then we didn't hear anything else about it? So I don't know who, I can't remember who was doing it or where it went, but.
Yeah, the environmental club?
Yeah, my sister is a co-founder of the environmental club, and that was a project we were looking into, but I think we decided it was a little bit ambitious. You'd have to ask her more about it. It sounds really, really cool, but it might be a little hard.
Well, so that's where the research phase comes in.
It would be great, and I'll get the name after we finish, but to connect with the high school environmental club, because some of these people will be in high school next year, and so they could take that energy there too.
I think there was a project about 3 years ago on LED lights as well. I think maybe one of the OMS advisory groups started on that. So maybe one of the challenges is just actually follow through and bring things to a recommendation to the board.
Yeah, I also really liked the shopping bag idea, and I was thinking maybe everybody could get together and have it as a fundraiser for your club, right? You could sell the shopping bags with the different school names on them that might be attractive to the community. So something to think about too.
Another thing too, the wellness committee has also done some work on the school, working for the school garden, that type of thing. So that's another option to reach out to the wellness committee.
I think all three of the communities are working on community gardens, so we're hoping that we could have a multi-community project going on, so that'd be great.
Anything else?
I just want to give one more thank you to Daniel Perkins in the back, who has been wonderful working with these students today. He spent a lot of time helping them film a PSA, and he's been a great idea and tech and video person for us. So thanks, Daniel.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up would be student report, student advisors report.
So the school year is coming to a close, and so we were thinking about some like concerns that we had this year and some changes that we could make next year. And so what Ben and I are thinking, and we've talked to our like fellow classmates about this, is an SAT prep guidance of some sort. So like students that don't really know how to start preparing for the SATs, they would be like put in the right direction. And I know Mr. Rulin and I talked a bit about this, and he said he would look into it and do something maybe during advisory or Muse. So that's one concern. Another one is laptop usage over the summer. I've had a lot of classmates come up to me and ask me about this, and so I thought I would present it now. And a classmate and I sent out a survey to the school. It's in your packet, and almost 80 or 98% of students need to use their laptops over the summer for like summer work, and they are really essential for completing AP summer work for kids who are taking more than 2 AP classes.
Can I ask a quick question on that? I know last year they weren't available because they were being upgraded. Is
Yeah.
this an ongoing issue where they're not available every summer, or was it a one-time thing?
I think it was, I don't,
Do you know, Rich, what the... They don't take them home for the summer?
They get inventoried and cleaned.
in the past we have. This was the first year, at least for me. Yeah, at least for me, this was the first year that I haven't been able, last year was the first year I haven't been able to take my laptop home.
Yeah, so last summer was the switch over. We collected all the laptops and traded in for the new ones, and this summer was an administrative decision to not send them home over the summer. We're concerned about, we have damage that happens during the school year. We're concerned about the damage that would happen over the summer, either theft, loss, damage that, and their primary purpose is for academics. Well, their sole purpose really is academics, and we don't think that the actual use is reflected in what the survey says.
Well, yeah, I know there are plenty of students that would just like their laptop to use just for recreational like purposes, but for students that don't have like a desktop computer at home or just a laptop, getting their summer work done is very, very difficult. And I know for me last summer, it was very hard for me to work on all the like essays I had to write and research I had to do over the summer. I had to like go to the library to use a computer many times. And so for students that don't live close to a library, this could be very difficult. It could also, I'm just thinking about like participation in AP courses. It may decrease.
Okay, so have you had a chance to talk with Mr. Rulon about this? I mean, it sounds like there's a strong student interest.
This was just brought up to me on Friday.
Okay, well, it looks like it's a strong student opinion, so
Yeah.
maybe that would be the next step, would be to meet with Mr. Rulon and have a conversation about that. Does that seem like a reasonable next step?
Absolutely.
Probably having some historical facts, too, if they were issued in years past, as you've indicated, to have those facts. Also checking with Mr. Larrabee to find the particulars about whether we would be able to do that or not would be helpful.
Do we have any idea about how many courses would require some work over the summer? I believe Ms. Goodall's AP Human Geography does, right?
All that does not need a laptop.
Doesn't need a laptop, okay.
By hand, the old-fashioned.
Okay. Do we have any idea, like even just a rough ballpark of how many, if any, courses require stuff over the summer, or what the AP workload is? Because for me, if we have coursework that these students are going to be taking in the fall that requires some work to be done before school starts, that requires a laptop, And that would seem to me to be a pretty big concern.
Yeah, and on a case-by-case basis, if a student had academic work over the summer, whether it was I'm taking a course at the university or I'm taking an AP class and they don't have access at home and they don't have internet access, absolutely, we would work with them and allow them to take it home. But, of the 360 students, it's much less than probably a quarter that would apply to. It's really only AP classes, and then of those students who don't have access at home or technology at home, it's small, and I feel like the loss that could happen if everyone took them home outweighs the handful that we would work with to allow them to take them home.
So you do envision some kind of an appeal or a petition process?
Absolutely.
so that students could come
Absolutely.
to- Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
It might even be an incentive for them to take more AP classes.
Exactly. Right. Exactly.
All right, that was it on the laptop issue. Thank you. Another concern that has been brought up is the lunches, and so we only have 19 minutes to eat lunch. And so for students that buy lunch, this is often not enough time to eat just because they have to wait in line for a solid amount of time. Yeah. And then
Our next big thing that we've been working on is physical education requirements for graduation. So Becca talked with Mr. Rulin and found out that 1 credit is required by the state to graduate, but our school requires 1.5 credits. And I personally have found that those credits are really limiting my schedule necessarily, like a little bit, because I would like to take a humane class next year, but I have to take PE all year because I haven't taken it yet to fill that one credit that I'm missing. So that's kind of getting in the way, and so we were wondering if we could bring it up to the board about changing that to drop it down to 1 credit instead of 1.5 credits. So there is a survey, I think, in our, hopefully it's in your report, of students that we asked a couple questions, like if you'd taken a PE class and if it got in the way of your schedule, and other things like that. The color is not, I don't know if you have great coloring, but so we found that it was almost half, or let me pull it up on my computer so I can see the colors. Sorry. Yeah. So about 20% of students that responded. So not everyone responded. About 130 people responded. About 20% of them said that this PE requirement has gotten in the way a lot. 40% said it hasn't gotten in the way at all, and the same amount has says it's gotten in the way a little. So it shows it's not a huge deal among a lot of students. However, it is just a little thing that could help out a few students. So we also asked a question, like if it was only 1 PE credit, what class would some students take? And the numbers are there, but some students said they would take an extra art credit or an English class, because those are usually half a semester, or a humane class, which is also a semester long. So those are our numbers, but we weren't exactly sure how to bring that up to the board for policy discussion or stuff like that. So
Great. So let me just answer the question about process. On the lunches, that's a scheduling issue, and you would be shocked how tied together all the schedules are once you change the high school lunch, the middle school lunch. So I'm certainly sympathetic. I had an 18-minute lunch period when I was in high school, and it's kind of a formula for indigestion. So I'm sympathetic, but we are, as a board, we've been talking about having a major revisit of schedules across the district, so that's probably the time and place to bring that up as one of the goals for scheduling. I think we'll be talking over the next 2 board meetings, next week and the 2 weeks after that, about the goals for next year. Scheduling was one of our goals for this year. It was one that we didn't get to, but that scheduling may or may not come out as a goal for next year, but sometime soon, scheduling, kind of rationalizing schedules across the schools is going to come up as an issue, and I think that's probably the best time to bring that up. And as far as the phys ed credit, I think probably there's a process that, again, I think is going to start with Mr. Rulin, and then what this district has adopted is if he wanted to make that curriculum change, you're actually, well, if you're still here tonight, we're going to talk about the policy that has graduation requirements in it. So there is a written policy, so probably the way that would work would be bringing the suggestion forward to Mr. Rulin, and if you came to agreement, it would come to the curriculum committee, which meets once a month, and they would make a recommendation to the board, and then we would modify the policy. So that one, hate to make it sound bureaucratic, but that one is kind of, graduation requirements are pretty carefully thought through, and so that would be what that process would look like. Again, I'm sympathetic to that. The high school I went to, if you were in a varsity sports, you got to opt out of PE. I don't think there was a statewide credit, but I can certainly see the logic of that. And but there may be counter arguments I'm not aware of, so I think probably starting with Mr. Rulin, and then he could bring that forward through the process for curriculum and graduation requirement changes. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Any other thoughts from the board?
I just wanted to get back to the SAT prep class that you led with, because I felt like that got buried a little bit. Are there any opportunities for an SAT prep course, or would that require a staffing change? No?
The only question I think to sort of follow up with that is, do our guidance counselors offer that, or do we send folk? How do we handle SAT prep now? Sure. Thank you, Michelle.
Can I say something real quick? I've heard a couple students say that in the guidance's handbook or the school handbook, guidance says they offer a free SAT prep course, but we've never been given the opportunity, so that's one of the reasons we were bringing it up. So.
Yeah, so we don't have an SAT prep course, and I talked with Becca about this, but I think a couple of things that we could do. We did provide kind of information around, Khan Academy has a course that's linked with a College Board account, so a student can log in with their College Board account, and Khan Academy links up and finds out where their weaknesses were and kind of prescribe areas they need to practice. So we offered that. We didn't require students to participate in that, but that's a great resource. That's no cost, no additional staffing, anything like that. And then the second thing that we talked about was our use of advisory group. We do have an advisory time every week, and it's been hasn't really been broken down by grade level as to what ninth graders might need versus 10th graders versus 11th and 12th. So I think for juniors, that advisory time, being a little more deliberate around having juniors sign up with Khan Academy and their College Board account. And then the third thing is we have math teachers who want to teach an elective in SAT prep, so actually getting an SAT prep course in our course catalog would be a third way to work on that. So none of those really exist right now in an intentional way. So I'm in full agreement that we need to do something deliberate and intentional around preparing our juniors for the SATs. And it doesn't have to mean additional staffing or even anything added to the budget. So.
Does that help?
Yeah, and I was saying, Becca was one who brought, she brought it forward, and we talked about it, so I appreciated that too. That I feel like there's an interest among students to do that. So.
I got a couple of questions on that. For the Khan Academy one, you said that it links to the College Board account and gets digs into that to see where their weaknesses were.
Yeah.
Is that based on PSAT performance?
Yeah, whatever tests they've taken with the college
They
board.
don't have to take
so-
the SAT one time before it's of actual.
Yeah, they have to have some
But it would be
test.
the PSAT?
The PSAT. I mean, for us, it would be the 10th grade PSAT and then the 11th grade PSAT. So, those fall PSAT tests. Then there's the spring state mandated SAT. So, some schools have a 9th grade, there's actually a grade 8 and 9 PSAT. We don't use it, but in order for this to mean anything, you have to have some prior testing in the data bank.
Do our
database.
students take the fall and spring SAT in their junior year?
As juniors, yeah.
So they take them both?
Yeah.
And the one that the state requires is the spring?
It's just the spring.
Okay. Okay. And then, it's been a long time since I've done the SATs as a student, and even longer since I've looked at an SAT exam, but would it be, when I prepared for the SAT, there were courses that you could take, which obviously had a cost attached to them, but it was also an option where you could buy some of the kind of test prep books and actually take practice exams.
Yeah.
Is that still an option, maybe even electronically? And if it is, could we look into spending maybe a little bit of money in the library to have that available if it's not already?
Yeah,
And I like the intentional part that you bring up too, and I think we have to, but for those students who want maybe some additional help.
Yeah.
Because for me, taking those practice exams for both the SATs and then for the GREs was a huge benefit.
Right. I mean, there's the test taking strategies and technique method of, and then there's the just practice.
Right.
So.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, the College Board does offer like 6, I think, or Khan Academy has about 6 practice exams. So.
Any other questions or comments? I guess I would just say thank you to the student reps for bringing these forward. And they all have processes ahead of them, and, some of them may or may not happen, but this is exactly what we're hoping you'll do. So thank you. Okay, just to confirm, no principal reports?
Yes, sir, no.
Okay, next week. Yeah, in general, if we have back-to-back meetings, we don't do reports twice. Okay, so next up is discussion items. This is ultimately a policy change, and if we wanted to, we could do the policy change tonight, but you recall, we've discussed a couple times now, prior to last year, we only had full-day cancellations, and state laws changed, and they allow 1 hour and 2 hour delayed starts and 1 hour and 2 hour early releases. So last year, we implemented, I guess it would be spring a year ago, so effective for 2016-17 school year, we changed the policy. We thought it'd be too confusing to have 1 and 2 hour delays, but we implemented either a full-day cancellation or a 2 hour delayed start. And at that time, intentionally left out any of the early releases, but we've had, I think, a pretty strong request from the current superintendent, and I think we heard also from some of the principals. Well, the principals can speak up again tonight if they want, but at a minimum, we've had a request from the current superintendent that we reconsider and look at putting in for the first time a 2 hour early release as well. And we did have a snowstorm this last winter, which was a perfect fit for that. Everybody knew 24 hours in advance that it was going to hit around noontime, and a 2 hour release would have been a great solution that wouldn't have pushed us another day back in June. How frequent that's going to happen, you can consult your favorite meteorologist, but it does happen sometimes. So there's been a request for the administration, and I think I've come around on this, so I'm personally in favor of it. One of the reasons I'm in favor of it, I think, is especially thinking about the high school students. High school students typically, many high school students drive themselves home. And and then also just the fact that having to cancel the entire day when we know that there's only going to be a couple of hours that are bad, does seem like that's an unfortunate thing. So that my proposal would be that we would authorize a 2 hour early release if it's announced the previous evening. So not something that's done in the middle of the day at 10 o'clock, you decide there's a 2 hour early release, but if we're in the situation of the storm I think it was in March, where everybody knew the night before, and in fact, every other district around us had announced an early release the night before. So I would propose something like, the superintendent is also authorized to release students 2 hours early if it was announced by the previous evening. So that would be, this is just a discussion right now, but that would be the type of language I would be thinking to propose in a policy if people are interested. I know the board has had different opinions on this, so I'd be curious to hear what other board members think.
I've always seen both sides of it, so I think there's arguments for either side, and I think Mike's, I think this was a unique situation this March, and his hands were tied, and that was a little bit unfair. So I think giving the flexibility seems like it could be helpful in the future.
I mean, I'm definitely pro. I mean, I can see that it creates confusion in the afternoon, but I think having that flexibility, especially if you can look at it and decide the day before, that it should be something we have the option to do.
I'm okay with it as long as we do the day before, which I think was Mark's original idea.
Yeah, I'm supportive of that option as well.
Okay, seems like there's a consensus. Do we want to just go ahead and amend the policy right now? All right, so I would propose policy EBCE. We add in the first paragraph, we add a second sentence that says the superintendent is also authorized to release students 2 hours early if it was announced by the previous evening. Everybody good with that? All right, so I'm making that motion to amend policy EBCE. Is there a second?
I second.
Okay, is there any discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Are we, I'm not so sure I want to amend it tonight.
Okay.
I'm supportive of it, but I do think that we should bring it forward either to the next meeting or the second one in June in case there's any kind of public comment, whether it be from parents, teachers, administrators who haven't weighed in yet. So while I'm supportive of amending it, I'm not supportive of doing it tonight.
Okay, we can bring it through the policy committee and through the, when it's an amendment, we have pretty much a choice of what we do, but we can still certainly bring it through the formal process.
I don't necessarily know that I mean, I'm fine if we want to bring it through the policy subcommittee. I'm also fine if we don't. I would like to give members of the community, whether it be parents, teachers, administrators who aren't here tonight and who maybe looked at the agenda and said, okay, this is just a discussion item, they're not going to take any action tonight on it.
Okay.
The opportunity, if they so desire, to weigh in. So if we just want to list it as an action item for next meeting.
We can put it under the policies for next meeting.
I'd be fine with that.
That's probably a good idea.
Given the time of year,
Yeah,
we have time.
it's not urgent. Okay, does that sound like a plan for everybody?
Unless it snows. Unless it snows next
So
week.
for the 6th. Yeah, so I withdraw my motion. Okay. Yeah, we'll bring it to policy subcommittee just because there is one between now and next week, but I don't anticipate a big discussion on it. Okay, so that completes number 7A. We're on to 8A. The health curriculum got moved to next week. That will be coming forward. Staff nominations and resignations. Mike?
Yes, resignations.
Nominations or resignations?
I do have a resignation from Jacqueline Deegan in first grade at Asa Adams, has brought me her resignation. She's moving out of state. So I'm recommending the board accept her resignation this evening.
Okay, I would motion to accept the resignation. Is there a second?
I'll second, but it's sad.
Second with regrets?
Well, it is sad, and one of her students, she showed them on it, my son's in that class, so she showed the students, like, hey, she broke it to the students, and this is where I'm moving, and one of the students said, that's a long drive to work every morning.
Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor? All right. Did you have other resignations?
No, sir.
So while we're on the topic of resignations, our lawyer from Drummond and Woodson recently recommended that we have a policy allowing the superintendent to accept resignations. So I wanted to get a sense of the board, how they feel about that. There are times when having a prompt resignation is important, for example, listing a new position. In certain cases, there are various employee actions that are triggered by the resignation. So I was wondering, and to my knowledge, we have never refused to accept a resignation. It's not really something we can do legally. So I was wondering, sometimes we might want to, but I was wondering what the board thought about a policy that would move us in that direction. We could have a notification, but the actual acceptance of the resignation could be by the superintendent to notify at the next board meeting, or what do people think about that?
Makes absolute sense to me.
Oh, sorry, while you have it. But the only thing that might be nice is if we're somehow emailed about the resignation, because I feel like if we were suddenly on serving schools and saw these positions pop up, it'd just be nice to have a little bit of information about who's resigning, if that's allowed. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we could craft it so that, we could craft it with a 2-day notice to the board, and unless
Yeah.
nobody on the board asks that it be placed on the agenda.
Yeah, I just hate to be surprised that we have an opening and whatever when people are asking.
Well, then in the check and balance context, you could cook up, it's a bit of a stretch,
course.
but you could cook up a scenario, right, where the superintendent has a personal issue and is trying to force somebody out that maybe shouldn't be forced out.
okay.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's another reason to do what you're talking about.
Yeah, it'd just be nice to not have to wait ourselves till the next board meeting.
Right.
to find out.
So what I'm hearing currently is kind of a 2-day notice, send an email to the board, and if nobody asks it to be placed on the agenda, the superintendent is empowered to accept the resignation? Yeah. Okay, I will draft a policy towards that end. Okay. Whoops, we just lost Mike. I believe he had some nominations. No, there's no nominations? How about co-curricular nominations? Okay, we'll come back if we need to. Next up are approval of donations and gifts. We have several gifts, which being greater than $500, need to be approved. I believe, do you all have the details in your agenda? Yeah, so first item is OEF, the Orono Education Foundation gave, I believe it was $700 to the speech team, speech and debate team, to attend the national contest. And so I would motion to approve the acceptance of $700 from the OEF, Orono Education Foundation, to travel to nationals for speech and debate. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Okay. The next one up, I believe you have it in front of you, but I'll read it for the audience. The families of Sandra Warner, a teacher, and Gladys Noyes, a secretary, have set up funds in memory of the women who served as longtime employees of Asa Adams. The Warner Fund holds $625. Asa Adams will be using this money to purchase a buddy bench, a composite playground bench where children who are in need of a friend may sit, signaling the need for a friend. The Noyes Fund, which holds $700, will go to purchase a yellow magnolia tree to be planted behind the Asa flagpole. A ceremony is planned for May 23rd. So I would motion to accept, I'm going to round up in case of need, up to $1,500 in gifts from the Warner and Noyes funds for the purposes just stated, the buddy bench and the tree. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there any discussion?
I thought the buddy bench was a great idea.
I liked it too, yeah.
Very sweet.
All right, seeing no further discussion, all those in favor? Okay, next up, it's nice to be accepting money. We get to do it 4 times tonight. Next up is a donation. I'm going to recommend up to $2,500 from the Cole Family Foundation for an Epson BrightLink interactive projector to be used in a OHS classroom. So I will make a motion to accept up to $2,500 from the Cole Family Foundation for projectors in OHS classrooms. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? All right, and the last one is the Perloff Family Foundation, a FlashForge 3D printer, Finder model, approximately $500 from the Perloff Family Foundation of Maine to be used in library new technology classroom. I would motion to accept up to $1,000 from the Perloff Family Foundation for 3D printer and related technology for use in the library new technology classroom. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there any discussion? I know we've been hearing a lot about this printer. There's lots of ideas, so I think it's very cool that that's going to be happening in the library. All those in favor? Okay.
Quick note, is this the second one we got? It is.
It will be the second.
Yeah, will be the second, yeah, okay.
Okay, so I think we did all 4 of the donations. Anything I'm missing on the donations? Very good. All right, you want to do the insurance bids?
Yes. Mrs. Gray, can you come to the podium? Come on up, you can help me. Every 5 years, under the statute, school districts are required to go out to bid for property and casualty insurance. We currently have our property and casualty insurance package through MSMA here in Maine, and we have done so under the law, and Mrs. Gray has helped me thoroughly through the process, make sure we dot our i's and cross our t's. So we're at the process where we're required to open the bids publicly here at a meeting. So I've received 2 bids, one from the Howard Insurance Agency in Dexter, Maine, and one from Maine School Management, MSMA, in Augusta. So I'll open those now. The first one here is from the Maine School Management. I'll read their correspondence. It says, "Dear Superintendent Tracy, thank you for the opportunity to provide RSU a competitive bid for this property and liability coverages. In addition to offering the best coverages for schools at competitive rates, the trust also provides loss control and risk management services to help you minimize the likelihood of claims being filed. Behind this letter, you'll find a line-by-line bid comparison worksheet, a tool used to provide an apple-to-apple comparison when asked to review bid proposals to compare limits, deductibles, and features of each line of coverage. We hope you'll find this tool helpful. Should you wish for MSMA to complete it for you, please let me know via this contact information. Look forward to discussing the trust program with you at your convenience and provide these insurance coverages services to your school unit." So I have one. I guess I'll pass the whole package to you. Actually, there's a couple different ones of the same thing, so I'll pass this one this way. And this one this way. I'll pass 2 this way here. We have, I'm going to give you what the general coverages are and the premiums. And this is from MSMA. The total property premium will be $14,716 for the year. And the total general liability premium is $3,906. $3,906 for the year. The total SBLL premium is $707. And then there's a couple other premiums for crime and boiler and machinery crime is $443, and the boiler and machinery is $2,805. So I will also show you this and pass it along. Along with the list of property coverages and the amounts.
Hey, Lynn, do you know, excuse me, do you know when we went out to bid, did you tell them what we wanted for minimum limits, or, like, are these quotes based on the same, we haven't opened the other one yet, but were they based on the same coverages? Minimum limits of coverage?
Yeah, there was a whole packet of information that we sent to all.
Yeah, so basically we sent them, these are our minimum requirements.
Right, these are, yeah,
So they should be apple-to-apple bids.
they should be apple to apple to bids.
And they also know the current coverages we have.
Yes.
Our current rates. I will now open the package from Howard Insurance. It's like Christmas up here. And the winner goes to? Okay, the insurance letter from Timothy Dow here at Howard Insurance. I'll just read the cover letter to you quickly. It is, Attached is our bid for your property and liability insurance coverages for the 7/1/2017 calendar year. Our quote is with I think it's Aragnaut Group and Company, as rated A carrier with AM Best. The school's insurance is currently with an association with Accessibility, where our quote is with an insurance company. We will list the coverages and premiums on the enclosed bid forms. Please take note that these forms are prepared by Maine School Management, so some coverages could differ. We have also noted that some differences on the forms, as we have increased the overall personal property coverages from 306,148 to 6,884,181. The personal property figures is replacement value of all personal property in its buildings. Current figure is 306,148. Is extremely low based on the size of the RSU. The company we bid with has a specialty program for schools and is one of the largest writers in the country. We quoted a $1 million excess liability policy for $500. If you wanted to go with the $3 million excess policy, it would be an additional $1,000. The RSU doesn't have any vehicles, but hired a non-owned auto coverage is included in the general liability coverage, which is another $1 million. I'm sorry, folks, this is the first time I'm seeing it, so I'm not as prepared as I normally would be. Okay, the total insurance bid, it looks like they have not aggregated it out based on the different areas that MSMA did. It looks like a total coverage amount of $25,406.
So I know by policy, we had to follow this process where the bids were opened in front of us, correct?
Yes.
Does it make sense for us to let Ms. Gray look these over and bring a recommendation to us at some point? Because obviously us trying to go through these now is...
Correct. Yeah. We can do that. We've been, we're prepared to make a recommendation. I'm not sure. One of the things I have not obviously had a chance to do, because I'm opening them now, is to sort of add up the total amounts of the MSMA proposal against the 25,000 total. Did they? And I didn't see it? Okay, so it sounds like we can give these to Lynn, because she's really the one that knows what she's doing here in regard to this. So Lynn, you want to come grab these?
Should I talk about what
Yeah, I'll take the extras. Those are the two. Well, that's who we currently have, and so it sounds like at this point, though, we have a difference. There are some differences in the coverage, as noted in those cover letters, and a difference of about $4,000, maybe $3,000 and change in the total coverages, premiums. Lynn, we currently have MSMA, and if you want to talk about that, that's fine.
Yep. Obviously, without looking over this, it seems like the lower price is Howard Insurance, but I can tell you that MSMA is huge in helping us. They work with schools all the time. Over the past 3 years, I know that I have called them on many issues, and they're right there to help. They know exactly what we're talking about, answer questions quickly. I don't know Howard Insurance Company, but I don't think that I know they at least don't handle too many local schools. I think maybe one.
Yeah, they handle a handful in Maine, a handful. I don't think any more than that.
So from a customer service point, I have been very comfortable with MSMA, and I think that they have a lot of great experience that we could possibly lose out on if we just go with the lower price. But I haven't looked at these, but right off the bat, I would say that MSMA has been huge in the past 3 years, just on any little question. They've been able to point us in the right direction, and always willing to do that.
Before Lynn and I came here this evening, we had already spoke about the fact that unless there was an obscene difference, and I don't think $3,500 or whatever the premium difference is definitely not an obscene amount difference, that because we've historically used MSMA, that our recommendation as a staff was going to be the MSMA premium insurance provider. I hate to do this to a board. And when I've been on a board, I hate to be in the recipient of what I'm about to say, but we will no longer have insurance July 1st, so we do have to have action tonight on this. And I apologize but the timing of getting the quotes and the bids, it's worked out this way. So I'm sorry. We could wait a week.
Could we wait till next week?
We could probably bring it back on the 6th. And
With just a little spreadsheet showing coverages and costs?
We could do that.
We could do that.
Trying to think.
I was saying that you also have to think about, like Mike was saying,
I understand
it's not a
service.
huge difference, but I can certainly do that if you feel like if it's going to make a difference.
Is there something in the statute that I don't know about off the top of my head with regard to making a decision tonight, or because it was an open process? Were we supposed to make a decision?
I was just looking at the policy. No, there's no.
We can bring it back.
The opening has a set time and place,
Okay.
which I guess was advertised for tonight, but the decision process is not
Okay.
specifically specified. How many years is this for?
5 year.
5 year. So it's over 50,000, so that means it does need a board approval.
Yes.
And execution by the board. So I would, as long as we're not going to miss the deadline, I'd feel much more comfortable having it come back
We could do that.
next week, since we do have a meeting next week.
On the 6th.
I'm just trying to think if there was a notification deadline of when we were going to notify the bidders in the initial proposal. Sorry, I wasn't planning to be here for this part tonight, so I'm not prepared to answer those questions.
I personally am comfortable with going with the recommendation of sticking with MSMA, given that we've had them for a long time. We've had good experience there. They seem to handle this for a lot of schools in the state, whereas the other insurance agency, as Mike pointed out, has a handful. And I'm also, if we want to bring it back next week, I'm okay with that too. But just speaking for me personally, I'm happy to move to approve MSMA's bid based on Mike and Lynn's recommendation.
So Lynn, correct me if I'm wrong, the big difference here is Howard is an independent agent that sells all different kinds of insurance, where MSMA is a direct supplier.
Right.
So it's almost like with your auto insurance, do you go through an agent or do you go through the company direct? Absolutely, I shouldn't say the customer service, I don't want to say anything negative about Howard, but you have more direct access when you go through the company than when you go through an agent, because you're basically going through a middle person, so.
Well, to be clear, MSMA brokers with Allegiance or.
They've got Lloyd's of London as their carrier,
Okay,
listed in the
Right.
thing.
So there is a separate carrier, but.
Right,
but
there is
MSMA's who we're
But that's all they do, correct?
But that's, and they do
They don't do.
schools.
Right.
That's what they do.
I think my only concern with, again, I think we probably would squeak by on a timeline because we're only a week out.
Right, yeah, I'm
okay,
fine with that. I can do whatever you want.
I could support you there. I think our recommendation's not going to change, but.
Well, let's do it through formally. I think, Mark, I heard you basically make a motion. You want to formally make a motion, and then we can discuss and vote on it?
Sure. I make a motion that we accept, on the recommendation of Mr. Tracy and Mrs. Gray, the bid for insurance from the Maine School Management Association.
Very good.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there any discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Abstain? Okay,
Thank you.
so you have board approval, so the contract, I guess, if it's over 50,000, the board chair is supposed to sign.
Okay.
So we can coordinate that.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, next up is policies. We have a number of policies. I think we should just take them in order.
Sure.
Start with IKF, graduation requirements. This is one of the handful of required policies we don't have on the books. We were waiting for the PB dust to settle a little bit, and I think, so Reg and Mike were the leads on this, although it has been through policy committee twice at this point.
Yes.
A number of changes from the policy subcommittee. Guidance council, school counseling at OHS has also looked at this and given feedback, so that's the history of the policy. This is a first read, so mostly we're looking for feedback at this point. And I'm sure our students may have
Do you want me to take?
may have an interest. Yeah, you want to quickly walk people?
Sure. Really, the front page is mostly boilerplate language that says we'll have a policy that has graduation requirements, and within that, we acknowledge a credit-based, sort of the dual system that we've talked about, a credit basis for teaching and learning, and as well as beginning with the class of 2021, awarding diplomas along with the PBE proficiency-based model, so that thereafter, students will be required to ascertain both credits and proficiencies. So the second page, the credit-based requirements, are what basically students are currently responsible for taking, and I think we were going to upgrade the mathematics to 4 credits. It's not reflected here in this policy.
It's down on B.
Oh, we did add it. Yes, I'm sorry. Yep, very good. Thank you. B down below, we added the math and the science technology credits additionally for next year. And then the next page gets on to alternative methods for earning graduation credits, and that could be adult ed, other methodologies through virtual courses, core, etc. Number 2 gets into the proficiency-based requirements. So again, diplomas received class of 2021 and beyond, and that discusses the courses on page, I think, 4, where it has English language arts, mathematics, science, technology, social studies, and so forth down the page. Will be there'll have to be a clear delineation of meeting proficiency in those areas along with gaining credit. And then lastly, there's there's discussion about multiple pathways in the policy that early college dual enrollment, career technology, online, apprenticeships, community service, exchange programs, independent study, core, adult ed, and/or other as agreed by the principal, special education, IEP information, as well as Section 3 gets into additional considerations as applicable to awarding diplomas at Orono High School. And there's dialogue about transfer students, homeschool option, and again, these are requirements within these categories. Options for students abroad, and so forth. So some of the things we discussed in committee were if students were going to be considered in the top 10, I think that's letter H, that they would wholly have to be a student for at least 4 consecutive semesters, was the language we came up with.
I think, Micah, that actually didn't incorporate the change that was
That didn't.
discussed.
Yeah, we changed that.
I think it was 6 total semesters, or as otherwise approved by the principal.
6 total semesters?
6 total semesters, or as otherwise approved by the principal. Does that match your memory, Red?
Yeah, that's what
We talked about the problem with the 4 consecutive being.
Because consecutive was the problem. We said 6,
Unsabbatical for a year.
so the majority of their high school experience, 6 semesters in total would have to be.
6 of the 8, yeah.
Okay. I'll fix that. My apologies. Was there any other consideration that I've left out, Reg? You don't, maybe you don't have it.
I'm gonna have to admit, I didn't look at this all that carefully. I just assumed everything we came up with in policy subcommittee was in here, so that's my fault. I probably should have went back through it, so.
I apologize for missing it.
Brian, did you?
I didn't see, I think all the other changes that I remember got
Are
picked
in
up.
here, okay.
Yep. Just to recap, since I know this is a big policy, it's basically, section 1A is basically incorporating our current student handbook policies. It's been a long time, technically the board is supposed to approve those graduation requirements, but as far as I know, that hasn't happened in a long time. But that's set in, and then for the class of 2021, two things more are kicking in. The credit requirements are being more specified to have 4 credits of math and a half credit of computer science, as we've already voted on in this board. And then also for the class of 2021, in addition to the credit-based system, they have to do the proficiency-based
Right.
system. So this is the dual system that we've been kind of talking through and heading towards during our PB conversation. So big picture, that's what's happening.
Okay.
So Becca and Ben, you're all up there under 1A. Nothing's changing that much for you. It's this year's current 8th graders who are really going to see the big difference. Any other questions or comments?
I have a question about the course with a chemistry emphasis. But I was just curious about that. Like, why isn't it chemistry?
Reg, do you know why it says course with a chemistry emphasis instead of chemistry?
Yeah, it's just for the students who, like forensics is that course right now. 2 semesters for the students who struggle with an honors chemistry. We only have honors chemistry, so it's an alternative for students who still have a chemistry-based science class.
May not be.
Probably not do so well in that honors chemistry class.
In the 9th grade, was it Earth and Planetary Sciences counts for the physical science credit? The 9th grade class, I forget the exact title, but the Earth and Planetary Sciences counts towards the physical science credit.
It's titled Earth and Physical Science, so I would assume so.
So the sciences, there's 1 credit physical science, 1 credit biology, 1 credit chemistry emphasis. Physical science is the EPS 9th grade class. It's not a later physics class.
No, it's that 9th grade.
Okay.
Are all 9th graders have to take that class?
Yeah, that is the 9th grade. It's either honors, EPS, or just regular.
Okay.
And I guess, I mean, not that this is going to change tonight, but the issue Ben brought up about the PE, that's in here, so that would be something through a process to change over the next year if there was an interest in doing that.
I'd be interested in just hearing a little bit. What piqued my interest about that, I guess 2 things. One is that the main law requires 1 credit instead of 1.5, and I'd be interested in knowing how many schools go with 1, how many schools go with 1.5, or maybe more. The other thing, and this is actually the one I'm most interested in, is the scheduling issue that you brought up. And I would be, if in fact the extra half credit of PE is preventing more students from taking a class on campus, then I'd like to know if that's the case. So, I mean, obviously we're not going to deal with that now, but kind of stuff for future discussion, I think.
It's anecdotal, but this came up in my house last night about preventing a college class, so it does
Really?
happen sometimes.
Yeah, so I guess I'd be interested in knowing those 2 things.
It's anecdotal, and it does get in the way.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know how common it is, but it does happen.
And the other thing too, I mean, it's as if, I guess this goes along with what other schools are doing. Is there kind of a sliding scale or a variation based on varsity athletes versus non-varsity athletes? You know, I mean, so if you're, in other words, are there schools that say, well, if you have a student who does, I don't know, letters in X number of varsity sports, they only have to do 1 credit, whereas if you have a student who doesn't meet that threshold, they have to do 1.5. I don't know the answer to that, but.
Most schools keep them separate because by participating in a sport doesn't mean that
Okay.
they're learning nutrition or whatever the physical curriculum is. So most schools
Keep it separate.
most aren't is with one credit.
Okay.
We'll find out area schools.
Okay.
And most do separate them from that. Main learning results around physical education. Most schools, it's hard to guarantee that every coach in every sport would be coaching in a way that's going to meet those standards. But
but
once you get beyond that one credit, then it does just come around.
Okay.
could
I don't
this,
think going below 1 credit is an option by state law, right?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Becca, sorry, go ahead.
Could this like curriculum and these standards be put into the health class though, like nutrition and like heart rate, measuring your heart rate? Couldn't those be put in the health
There's
class?
separate, there's a health, there's a health requirement by the state that is, and those, that's a different curriculum than the physical education piece. So I probably shouldn't have brought up nutrition, we're talking about phys ed, but two separate requirements, health requirement and phys ed requirement.
Yeah, I think even if we reduced it, I know that's in the future, but to 1 credit, a lot of students may still take that extra 0.5 of PE, but I think it just leaves the option open for kids who want to take necessarily, an English class like Women in Lit or Metamorphosis or a fun elective like that. I think it just gives them the opportunity rather than forcing them to, take outdoor education or PE fall or whatever, instead of something that they may want to do more than the PE class.
It could also potentially expand the like STEM programs, so kids would like have the opportunity to take more STEM classes. And I know we're like talking about that now. So
So it seems like there's at least an interest. I don't know we should give Reg time to research it in the 1.5, but
Absolutely.
I don't think that process, to respect the process we've set up, that's not going to happen this spring. So, I mean, this policy I would perceive as going forward without that change happening, but I would certainly encourage, students advocating for their interest on that and having a process that moves forward in consultation with the school in the future. And-
One more thing on this policy, we had talked about the service learning piece.
Mhm.
Reflected here, either
Oh, yeah, we did edit that. You're right. Good catch.
we said that it would be 30 hours of finished service, the service learning project.
Yep.
I think this is just a first read tonight, right?
Correct.
I think we should get the fully revised version and move it to a second read next time, and then
Yeah.
especially those of us on the policy committee can be more diligent, especially me, who didn't do more than give it a cursory glance today.
So right now it reads, it's a little bit dated, we're not actually doing this. You have to do 30 hours of community service and a service learning paper as a junior and an oral and visual exhibition as a junior. This occurred a while back when we had a full-time or part-time service learning position, which we are now reinstating. But the intention was to change this and basically put a big or between the first and second line so that it was either 30 hours of service or for those who wanted to take the class and do a more formal structured.
Just total.
I think the exact wording, we had worked out some exact wording, which we can bring through the policy committee, but that was the basic intent.
It was my bad. I think I had the notes, and I don't think they made it to you. So, my apologies.
Anything else people have noticed?
The only thing I noticed, page 3C, the word learning appears twice. That's all.
Yep, okay. All right, so I would motion to acknowledge a first read on policy IKF. Is there a second?
I will second.
Is there further discussion on IKF? This will be coming up in 2 weeks. Actually, we need 2 weeks between first and second reads, so it can't come up next week. It'll be coming up on the June 20th. Okay, all right, all those in favor of acknowledging the read? Okay. I wanted to make sure we did that while the students are here. Some of these other policies, like bidding and purchasing, may or may not be of interest to you, so. And I think by the time we get through those, it'll be 8 o'clock, so you're welcome. Well, let's see. Actually, let me just read them, and you're welcome to stay for as many as you want. So next up, we have, find my agenda. Next up, we have medical marijuana. This would be a second read, so we will actually be enacting this tonight, potentially. And then the next read would be JICK, which is bowling.
I'd like to have the students,
It would be nice to have you stick for both of those. Yeah, and then we have gate receipts and purchasing and educational philosophy. So I think that the next two, it might be nice to have students here. So coming up for a second read, we read this at the May 5th meeting, is medical marijuana in the schools. I just noticed there's 3 O's up at the top, so that's one typo to fix in schools. This is basically the MSMA boilerplate policy. We did not make any changes. At the last read, the only comment was to check what happens for the core alternative education program, which is in a different building. And I think Reg can correct me if I'm wrong, but the feedback was that they were fine with this policy, that any medical marijuana would be administered in the principal's office at the high school, that students in core go back and forth between buildings enough that that would not be an issue. So there is a clarification or follow-up, but there's no changes to the policy other than the spelling correction I just noted. So I would motion to adopt this policy as presented. Is there a second? We'll still have discussion. Is there a second on adopting?
I second.
Okay, now we have discussion. Is there other further discussion on this?
So when I read through it, it doesn't address a field trip situation, does it?
No, that's true.
Or, Reg, I don't know, like a senior trip or something? I don't know if they do those.
It would have to be a field trip where they're gone for the day. Yeah.
Which is it? Totally.
Well, we got the Spanish trip, right? I mean, so we
Yeah, yeah.
do have trips. I mean, we have overnights.
I mean, I guess if the policy were to apply it as it stands, the parent would have to go on the trip
They'd have
and
to go on the
administer.
trip.
Conversely, I'm not sure the teachers would be thrilled if we were forcing them to give medical marijuana in lieu of a parent.
No.
So-
I wouldn't.
Well, I think the policy is pretty clear that we can't do that.
Right.
Which I agree with.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure what other alternative we could have for a field trip situation. Okay, we certainly,
Anyone have any ideas?
I mean, short of paying for a certified nurse to go on the field trip.
Even that wouldn't necessarily cover, though, depending on where it was.
Correct.
If it's not legal someplace, then
That's right.
But there must be other prescriptions that fall into this category, correct? Is
We-
it just because it's medical marijuana, or do we have a policy for?
It's because it's marijuana.
Painkillers.
We do have a whole separate policy on prescription medications, and those by and large go through the nurse's office, and written permission is considered adequate.
But what about when they're on trips?
Yeah, on a field trip.
How is that handled?
I think it just may exclude the student from going. So unless it's required by the school that the student attend this, so say a field trip, for most fielders in district day, they leave 8 a.m., they come to school and then leave and then come back, in which case the student could get their dose at school and then go on the field trip. I think we would run into it when it's an overnight, in which case those are, I can't think of any that are required for a student to attend. Like the trip to Spain is optional. The students opt in, they pay for it, and so
we don't have any overnight kind of sporting activities like championships or anything like that, at least in theory. Swimming.
For track.
Yeah.
For track, they have to.
yeah, there are those.
But that's optional as well.
And typically parents are at those, or the overnights?
If anything is out of state,
It's rare, it would be a rare student, something like that, a parent would need to go. comes out to whether we're requiring the student to attend this school event, in which case
We would be required, we'd be responsible.
But even for something like the New England Championships, we're not requiring them. The student could qualify, but we're not requiring that they go for any reason.
So this policy as written then, if we recommend moving forward, in those cases, either a parent would have to go on the optional trip or they would not go on the trip.
Correct. And if the parent goes, I think it's entirely consistent with this policy. They're allowed to administer
Well,
outside
I
of.
think most out-of-state trips at this point with the current laws are going to be out-of-state anyway, for the most part, aren't they? And then
Right, it would be
kind of
illegal in
void
other states
anyway.
at the moment.
I know that'll change, but then we can make changes to the policy if that happens.
Given that the parent has to be giving this under day-to-day circumstances, I think I'm okay with the requirement that the parent has to go on the field trip. I mean, the alternative is to require an employee to administer medical marijuana, which I think is a very sticky wicket. I think a lot of employees are going to have issues with that, so.
I'm in favor of adopting as is.
Further discussion?
Yeah, the only other question I had, when I read it, and I've read it a couple times, on the first page, D seems to contradict E and G, and what I mean by it says medical marijuana may only be possessed by the primary caregiver. It cannot be given to or held by any school employee, student, or other person in school with the exception of the qualifying patient. So can the qualifying, this makes it, when I read that, it sounds to me like the student can carry it on themselves because they're the qualifying patient. But when I read E and G, it's clear that only the caregiver can carry it. Is that just am I reading that wrong, or is
I
it?
think D is a little ambiguous. I think if I wanted to parse it really finely, there's a semicolon after medical marijuana may only be possessed by the primary caregiver. So I would read, with the exception of the qualifying patient, as applying to held. So in other words, this is getting really nitpicky. It's meaning only the parent can carry it around, but they can hand it to the student to take. And this was written by a lawyer, so I wouldn't be shocked if they intended that on purpose, but.
Okay. You just answered my question. It was written by a lawyer.
But I agree, that's an ambiguously worded statement. Any other comments? All right, ready for a vote? All those in favor? Okay. Next up is JICK, which is the bullying and cyber bullying. So just a little bit of context. We had a good policy in place. The board about 5 years ago had done a lot of work and was way ahead of the state standards, but now the state laws have been updated, and we need to update partly just to comply with state law, to match the state law, but also I think the state laws have caught up with and advanced ahead of us. So this, as it's currently drafted, is just the MSMA boilerplate. Obviously, it looks like we hand-corrected RSU 26 or found one place. So other than replacing RSU 26, this again is for a first read. I guess I wasn't completely clear, but the medical marijuana was a second read, so that's now policy. This is just a first read. This has been through the policy subcommittee twice. We have received feedback from the principals. I guess I wouldn't represent it as they're being entirely comfortable with it. But on the other hand, this is pretty much required by law as written.
So we're going to update the preamble.
I was the introduction language. I was going to try and pull a little language out of our old policy that just says this district cares a lot about bullying. That's not going to have any legal impact, so I will try and get that in place before the next read. In fact, before the next policy subcommittee meeting. But the section 2 and beyond is the bulk of it, and this is basically all set by state law at this point. Sets up a rather more involved, or I don't know if I'd say involved, but certainly more documented process. So now there's a whole series of forms. There's Form JICK-E1 for reporting, JICK-E2 for responding, Form JICK-E3 for remediation. So every one of these complaints is going to have 3 forms, paperwork that's worked through typically by the principal or assistant principal, sometimes the school counselor, but this is what the new state law is on the policy, and we need to come into compliance with it by the end of the semester. Any of the administrators have any comments that they want to add to this? This will come up at least once more in policy subcommittee too, but any questions from the board?
It's not really a policy question per se, but I was just wondering, as part of the 9th grade classes and some of these other new computer classes, is this being talked about as part of the curriculum? I was just sort of reading through and thinking about all, before cyber things, all these things that happened to me in high school by other people, and I was just wondering what sort of education we're doing to get ahead of it.
I don't think at the moment we have a specific bullying training
Mhm.
for our 9th graders. So
Sorry.
it is, we do in our advisory, one of our advisory.
Okay.
Address that, so.
Yeah, I just think it's interesting. I mean, certainly I don't want these things to happen, but I also see some whoopses that could happen, and I was just wondering, if it could also be an opportunity to create some curriculum around what not to do.
Michelle, were you thinking specifically of cyberbullying?
I was just thinking, it's really fantastic that the students have computers, but what sort of education are we doing to help them understand, what things aren't quite appropriate? And I think it should be earlier than high school as well.
Yeah.
So.
I feel like it gets addressed at ASA too. I know it's part of their, we've talked about
Do
it.
some stuff on digital citizenship, right?
I think ASA in the middle school do a lot about bullying in general, but 9th grade computer class might be an interesting time to specifically address cyberbullying. I mean, not a big part of the curriculum, but actually, I think a lot of kids have not thought through the cyber part as much. And I also know from having taught a sex education class outside of the schools that the kids are completely unaware of the laws around things like sexting. They're quite shocked to find out some of the things that some of their friends have been doing are actually probably illegal. So it might be worth some education specifically in the cyber arena.
I think I would agree with Michelle, though. It has to be earlier than 9th grade.
Okay.
I mean, just from some of the things that I've seen out there, it has to be addressed before that, I would think.
Well, I also think, like with the news, right? All these things are coming up, and there's a little bit of complacency or sensationalizing, and I think it'd be just really helpful to help our students out more, if possible.
So some of this is going to be on the topic around sexuality education that's going to come up next week. I know that it is in that curriculum.
Okay.
Not the bullying piece, but the sexual aspect of the bullying. Other comments or thoughts? Anything? I know this is probably a quick read to digest, but if you read it and you have thoughts, we'll have it coming up on the June 20th meeting as well, or you can just email me.
There's a few formatting things, but I think that was noted earlier, like numbers are twice, and
Yeah, we need to.
You'll get those.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess I've got just kind of one comment and then one substantive point. Just the comment is this is one of those instances where I think it's particularly valuable to have student reps. So again, I know you probably just got this, but if you have a chance to look it over and kind of give your feedback and maybe run it by some of your peers, that would be valuable for us to hear. The other is, I guess, maybe a matter of substance. This is on JIC-R on page 3. It talks about responding and investigation under the first, I don't know if this is a bullet point or a club or what this is, fleur-de-lis, I'm not sure what it is there, but ensure that all reports of alleged bullying are investigated and responded to promptly, and then in brackets it says, or within, and there's a blank space, days. I don't know if that's clarified in JIC-E2, or if that's something we need to address here.
You're in the administrative guide.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. we should make sure it's consistent with the main policy.
Yeah, I mean, I would be in favor of leaving it somewhat flexible and leaving it as promptly. But on the other hand, if the number of days is, if it's specified somewhere else, it should match everywhere.
We have the
it is.
exact same issue. It says promptly or within blank days in the main policy, so
Okay.
that needs to be updated. I agree, we should keep it vague, or not vague,
Yeah,
but
just
flexible.
Pull the,
As much flexibility as we
Yeah.
can, but as long as it matches everywhere, then.
pull the or out.
Yep.
That's what would be my preference.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay. Any other comments? All right, motion to acknowledge first read of policy JICK and the 3 forms and the regulations. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Okay,
And just for clarification, that'll come back on the 20th?
correct. So that was a first read, this will come back. So we now have 3 policies that are all revisions. We can, if we wish, yeah, so let me just, for the students, we're going to read the educational philosophy, athletic gate receipts, and then the bidding and purchasing requirements. You're welcome to leave now, or welcome to leave at any point. Are there any of those that sound interesting to you? Or we can put those first if you want. So we have the educational philosophy, we have the gate receipts, and I'm sure purchasing is not on your list, but no is an acceptable answer.
No bidding and purchasing?
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's
Put in AD next.
let's just do it in the order. Well,
DFD?
yeah, let's do gate receipts. So, okay, so the context on this is the current policy we had was incredibly short, but it was being read that it was entirely for capital expenses under the control of the board. Mr. Archer approached Lynn, pointing out that in the past it had sometimes been used for emergency issues that weren't in the budget, such as uniform purchases for teams that were much larger than expected. For those of you who've been hanging around this board for a really long time, which might only be Mark and myself, this is kind of an ongoing issue of board control of gate receipts versus local control. And at some point, the board pulled it in very tightly, and this is basically a somewhat lessening of it. So the proposal is basically that it's primarily still focused on capital improvements under the direction of the board and the superintendent, but from time to time, when the needs are unexpected, athletic operations with principal and superintendent approval and notification, but not approval by the board, expend them for other purposes. So that's the compromise that's proposed. And it's pretty straightforward. You can read it if you want. And Mike is happy with it. He came to a policy subcommittee meeting and thought this was workable.
Mike Archer.
Mike Archer, yep.
It all seems fine. I guess it's just a long-term budgeting of total dollar amounts, but I guess the amount coming out of the gate receipts is set a year ahead of time. So it isn't something like we're going to replace the scoreboard, but suddenly don't have the money because there was a larger than normal basketball team, right?
Right. I mean, the typical balance is 20, 30,000. And I would imagine most of these short-term emergency approvals are going to be 1,000 or 2,000.
Okay.
So I don't see them massively changing that. The argument that's been brought up, I brought it up and Mr. Archer agreed, is that while it's good to have these funds, I mean, the facilities are by and large built by the district, so it's reasonable for the district to have control. But one principle I care about is that this money is being raised in essence by the students playing sports. Yeah. So I would like to see it being spent in a timely fashion so the students actually see the benefit of the gate receipts. So I think that's the argument, as well as just the emergency aspect of things. All right, so we can still discuss, but I'll make a motion to adopt policy DFD as presented. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there further discussion? So this is an amendment. It does not require a second read. We can have it go to a second read if anybody wants to, but it has been through one policy subcommittee and the current board meeting. So I'm proposing that we just adopt the change and it goes into effect tonight. That was my motion. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor? Okay. Next up, let's do bidding and purchasing. So you probably are sick of this policy. We spent 4 months on it in the fall. But the good old federal government came back and said, anybody who spends federal dollars has to have the following language in our policies to guarantee that they spend it the way we want to. So basically, the policy hasn't changed, except we now have bullet point 4 for purchases using federal funds, blah, 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 blah. This is a bunch of language cut and paste from what we are required by the federal government to have. Number 5 and number 6 have actually come out of a separate policy, DJD, I think. But they are now required by the federal government, so it made sense to just pull it all in one policy. I didn't even know they were in a separate policy, but they're required by the federal government, and we had versions of them in a separate policy. So when I motion this, we're actually going to, I probably should look up the letter. Do you remember, Angie, what the other one was? DJH or DJH? I think it's H2. Is that something, if you're on the internet, can just real quickly look? It's on our existing policy page. I'm going to motion to repeal DJH and to adopt this as it stands. And then there's section F, purchases with the federal funds. So really all we did is we say if we're using federal dollars, you get 2 pages of text that you have to comply with from the federal government.
Yeah, and the other piece was the conflict of interest application.
The conflict of interest came out of that federal requirement as well, so it got pulled out.
Okay.
And we just confirm what the other policy letter is.
Yep. Slow going here. Where is policies?
It's under the school board menu.
Yeah. There it is. Change nominal. All right.
It's down to the Ds. DJH? Yep.
DJH, purchasing and contracting procurement of staff code of conduct.
So that's all been pulled into this policy. That's not going away. So I'm motioning to adopt the policy, to amend the policy as presented and to remove policy DJH. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, discussion. Also, we get a giant regulation book, but is that what you're looking at, Michelle?
No.
No, okay.
I'm ready to vote.
That's fine. Yeah, any other discussion? All right, all those in favor? Okay, we can now take Title I funds again. All right, last one coming up is AD. This is an amendment. We can vote on it tonight. We may want on this one to defer it until next week. There's 2 things that have happened here. So the second paragraph, we have pulled language that was primarily driven out of the strategic plan, and we put in the language that came out of the Student Growth and Achievement series of workshops. So the second paragraph and then bullet points 1, 2, 3 underneath it. That's one thing that's happened. You can check the language, but this is basically, I think it's a reasonable representation of what came out of Student Growth and Achievement. The other thing that happened is this paragraph at the end of the first page. There should be a period. So the 6th line, it said, basically, this is where it says the RSU 26 board charges superintendent, principals, and staff with teaching and assessing the Maine state system of learning results and its guiding principles, period. That's where the old policy ended. The rest of this paragraph is new. So there's nothing in here that actually requested teaching of performing arts and world languages. I think those are district goals. So while I was looking at this, I added that in. So there's a sentence. RSU 26 also greatly values the visual and performing arts and world languages and charges the superintendent's, principal, and staff to provide robust instructional programs in these areas and to work towards identifying appropriate learning standards in these areas. So that's new. The next sentence is what's going to come up next week. It was originally on the agenda for tonight. There has been a move, I think it's fair to say, most strongly at the middle school, but it's been a strongly coordinated process across the school counselors in all 3 schools to add some comprehensive sexuality education into the curriculum. Peter's going to speak about this next week, so I don't want to get too far ahead of him, but that phrase, comprehensive sexuality education, is important because it includes a lot about bullying and consent and healthy relationships. It's not just what you might think of as sex ed. And they have identified a national set of standards, and so they're, in particular at the middle school, but I think at all three schools, there's an interest in going ahead with this, but I think the guidance counselors all were pretty clear that they wanted the board to state that we are aware this is happening and we actually want this to happen. So this is a sentence directing that those standards be taught to as well.
And that'll be presented, well, there's two separate things. There will be a comprehensive sex education, healthy lifestyles curriculum that will be presented next week, separate from this policy. I think Brian clearly stated that, but Sam Runco is in charge of that initiative with Peter Bruner from the middle school, who will be presenting next week on that. So we can either, the board's pleasure to adopt the policy or put it off a week, but I just wanted to parse out the differences.
I had a question about the first part, the additional sentence. So I think the things in that second sentence, the new one that begins with RSU 26, are great. I'm just not sure why they're in a separate sentence. Could we add the visual, performing arts, and world languages to the previous sentence to make everything as one? So you talk about language arts, mathematics, science, history, technology, visual and performing arts, and world languages all together.
Let me read it. I think the reason I didn't do that is because the standards around the learning results are stronger, which is charged to ensure that children learn and demonstrate achievement and proficiency, whereas I had a more weakly worded sentence around the visual and performing arts and the world languages. And then, in fact, there are not standards that we could charge them towards.
Values.
Right, it's more a statement of value.
Oh,
That we want these things taught in our schools as well.
okay. Okay.
That was the
Thank you.
thought.
Sorry, Jake?
So I think what I'm going to say Mike kind of alluded to. I'm not necessarily comfortable approving this without knowing what is entailed in the National Sexuality Education Standards.
Yeah, there is a document. We should make sure that gets circulated. Yeah, originally, when I brought this up, I thought the other thing was going to happen tonight. I agree, we should postpone it until we hear from them next week. But, yeah, any other feedback? And the standards are age-based, so obviously you're not teaching the same thing to everybody. So I think we're going to defer action on this unless somebody wants to make a motion. It'll just come back next week. In particular, the student growth and achievement language. Anybody have questions or issues on that? Or if you don't feel like that's accurate, be sure to bring that up next week. Okay. That gets us through policies. We're going to be doing a lot of policies for the next two meetings. Reports, policy subcommittee. We're going to look at JICK again. I think that's probably the main focus. I think everything else we got, and we'll probably look at IKF, the graduation standards again. But I guess we'll do a new one about accepting resignations as well. Those are the things on the agenda for this Thursday. So, yep. And you've seen the results of everything we've done so far. Policy subcommittee is the first Thursday. Yeah, no, not the board meeting. We have 3 board meetings this week, Jake. No, policy subcommittee on Thursday afternoon. And then we'll, of course, be back here Monday and Tuesday, right? Okay, UTC.
The meeting has been put off now until June 15th so that they can have a better idea of budget issues to our next meeting coming up. And that's about it.
Okay, Spruce?
Spruce is also meeting June 15th. That's our next scheduled meeting.
And do we think we'll really know anything about the budget by June 15th?
So at the last UTC meeting, Jim Dill is on that board also, and he said that they would not be voting on the budget in Augusta for a very long time. So they're not even close.
Yeah.
So
It's good to hear it from a legislator, but that's what I inferred. Yeah. Curriculum Subcommittee. Mike, nothing?
I don't think we're going to meet again for this year. We are working on the curriculum project, and I should have an update at the next meeting or my superintendent's report, hopefully for next week, for what I'll be handing off to your new superintendent.
Is there any other business? Mike and I were working on a future agenda for next meeting. We already had about 7 things lined up, but is there anything people specifically want to see on the agenda for next meeting? So remember, the next meeting, we have the public workshop at 5 o'clock. I am going to advertise that through the Friends of Orono Schools listserv. I was not going to abuse the Blackboard system to 800 parents again. We've had a lot of meetings of late that we've asked for their feedback, so I was just going to do unless people think otherwise, just do the Friends of Orono listserv. I don't know how big an attendance we get. If we have a small attendance, we can just use that for board workshop.
I think I sympathize with overburdening people using the Blackboard system. However, given that there have been some concerns raised in the past about announcements going out in venues that not everyone has access to, that I think the best way to do it is to send it out Blackboard. Send it out on Friends of Orono Schools too, but everybody gets the Blackboard
Okay.
one, so let's just send, and people are free to delete it if they
I was
want to.
kind of trying to save my powder for showing up to vote, but we'll
Well,
just do
I
it
mean,
twice.
yeah, I sympathize with those kind of complaints, and this way that
Yep,
solves
okay.
that problem.
All right, I will.
Can you go over again what we're going to be talking about at this public forum?
So the public workshop is, the board is supposed to adopt goals. So some of those goals usually end up being board-specific goals. Some of them end up being goals or foci for the district for the year. And in one of our policies, one of our A policies, we're supposed to do that we've gotten on a schedule of doing that every June so that they exist for the coming academic year. And so the public workshop from 5 to 6, it'll be advertised as a separate meeting. It'll be a workshop format. It won't be filmed. We won't be sitting up at a dais. Is to get input from the public. We are required by the policy to get input from diverse sources. Teachers are obviously welcome to that 5 o'clock meeting as well. We also, I believe, handed out a questionnaire at the town meeting, the budget meeting. Did that actually go out? I wasn't there. Do you know, Angie, did we get a form at the budget meeting?
It was on the table.
It was on the table. All right, I need to get those forms at some point. And nobody left any. Okay. And we did also put it in my last Blackboard message. We had a web link, and last I looked, we'd gotten 4 people's input. So we haven't got a lot of input, but aside from policy, it's a good idea, and policy requires broad input before we make our goals. So this is a chance for the public to make input, and if that process finishes, the board can have an informal conversation. And then at 6 o'clock is the board meeting, where we have a number of business items and policy items, as well as one of the agenda items is starting the goal process, because we need to finish by the 20th. Does that make sense? All right, so I will advertise the 5 o'clock meeting on Blackboard, and I will mention the vote. And I will probably send out an email the day before the vote as well. Okay?
And it's fine to spread that news.
Absolutely.
Through whatever
I'm going to put it
forms.
on the Friends of Orono listserv, put it on the Orono Parents listserv. I mean, I'm not expecting a large show out, but I would love to be wrong. I would love to have lots of public show up, and teachers or parents, and giving us feedback about priorities.
The vote is on the 6th?
13th.
13th.
Is the polling location the middle school gym again, or not? Do we even know?
I don't know the answer to that.
And can you vote early?
Yes.
You can.
You can. That's a yes. Do we know where the polling location is for the June 13th? So it is the middle school. Okay.
For people listening at home, that was Orono Middle School for the June 13th validation referendum. Okay, thank you.
And as of now, you can vote in the town office.
Yes, absentee
It's 2
ballots.
weeks, so effective now.
Okay.
You can also stop by the town office to get an absentee ballot.
Okay.
or early voting ballot, either one.
Thank you.
Okay. Now we come to public comment. Second public comment. Seeing no public comment. Our next two board meetings are Monday, June 5th at the Orono Town Council Chambers here. That will be I believe it's a workshop format discussion with the town council about the budget. There's only one agenda item. You should have already seen the agenda. Tuesday, June 6th, we have the 5 p.m. public workshop, which will be here in a workshop format. And then at 6 o'clock, we have a regularly scheduled board meeting with the agenda circulated probably tomorrow, within the next 2 days. We just didn't want people to get confused between agendas for today and next week. And then, yep, and then we do have one more board meeting on June 20th. And
Will you be asking board members to bring their calendars to discuss dates?
yeah, so.
Next meeting or the 20th?
The June 6th, we will be trying to set dates for the next
Future.
year, at least for the fall. So I know some people can't commit, but if you have particular calendar items to bring, just know that we're going to be discussing. The default is first and third Tuesdays of every month. But I don't think those are going to hit. We'll check to make sure they don't hit holidays or other major things, but we'll have that for the next board meeting, and you should bring calendars if you have input. All right, is there any requests for information or follow-up? No? Seeing none, I motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
I will second and note that it is 8 o'clock.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Okay. Don't get used to it. I think